The morning sun barely broke through the gray Kansas City skyline when 9-year-old Emma Hartford stood in front of storage unit number 847, clutching a rusty key in her small hand. Her golden retriever, Buddy, sat faithfully beside her, his tail wagging despite the cold autumn wind that cut through their worn jackets. Emma's grandmother had passed away 3 weeks ago. The funeral was small, attended by only a handful of people who remembered Dorothy Hartford from the diner where she had worked for 40 years. Emma's mother, Sarah, couldn't afford to take time off from her 2 jobs, so Emma had spent most of her childhood with Grandma Dorothy in her tiny apartment that always smelled like cinnamon and old books. The lawyer's letter had arrived yesterday. Dorothy Hartford had left everything to her only granddaughter. A 1987 Chevy that didn't run, $17 in a savings account, and this storage unit that nobody in the family even knew existed. The monthly rent was paid up for the next 6 months, the letter explained, and after that, Emma would need to decide what to do with whatever was inside. Sarah stood behind her daughter now, arms crossed against the morning chill, her waitress uniform visible beneath her thin coat. She had exactly 40 minutes before her shift started at the truck stop off Interstate 70. Emma, this is probably just old furniture or boxes of junk. We can call someone to haul it away. We don't have money to keep paying for storage. Emma didn't respond. She stepped forward and inserted the key into the padlock. It resisted at first, corroded from years of neglect, but finally gave way with a metallic click that echoed through the empty corridor. Buddy stood up, his ears perked forward with sudden interest. The rolling door screeched as Emma pulled it upward, revealing a dark space that smelled of dust and forgotten time. Sarah pulled out her phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating shapes covered in gray tarps and plastic sheets. Great, just great. More stuff we have to get rid of. But Emma wasn't listening. She had already stepped inside, Buddy right at her heels. The dog's behavior changed immediately. His tail stopped wagging. His nose went to the ground, sniffing intensely along the concrete floor, moving with purpose toward the back corner of the unit. Buddy, what is it? The storage unit was about 10 by 15 feet, packed with furniture that had seen better days. There was an old wooden dresser with missing handles, cardboard boxes stacked 4 high with labels too faded to read, a standing lamp with a torn shade, and against the far wall, a massive antique wardrobe that looked like it belonged in a Victorian mansion. Buddy ignored everything else. He went straight to the wardrobe, pawing at its base and whining in a way Emma had never heard before. Sarah checked her watch. 35 minutes. We really need to go. I'll call the donation center this afternoon. They can come pick this stuff up next week. Mom, wait. Buddy found something. Honey, he's just excited. Dogs smell all kinds of things. We really have to leave. But Emma was already kneeling beside Buddy, running her small fingers along the base of the wardrobe. The dog's whining grew more insistent. Then Emma felt it. A small gap between the wardrobe's bottom panel and the floor. It wasn't sitting flush against the ground. There was a space maybe 2 inches high. Mom, there's something under here. Sarah sighed, walking over with her phone light. What she saw made her pause. The wardrobe wasn't just old, it was extraordinary. The wood was dark mahogany, carved with intricate patterns of flowers and birds. The craftsmanship was remarkable, the kind of thing you might see in a museum or an expensive antique store. This doesn't look like Grandma's style at all. Emma was already trying to move the wardrobe, but it wouldn't budge. It must have weighed 200 pounds. We need to tip it forward, Mom. Just a little. Sarah hesitated, then checked her watch again. 28 minutes. She was going to be late, which meant she might lose this job like she'd lost the last one. But something in her daughter's voice, something in the way that dog was acting, made her set down her purse. Okay, on 3. But then we're leaving. They positioned themselves on either side of the wardrobe. Sarah counted down, and together they tilted it forward. The bottom panel, which Emma had felt was loose, suddenly fell away completely. It clattered to the concrete floor, and in the space where it had been, revealed by Sarah's phone light, was a flat metal box, no bigger than a briefcase, covered in dust but clearly intentional in its hiding place. Buddy barked once, sharp and clear. Emma and Sarah looked at each other. The storage unit suddenly felt different, charged with possibility and mystery. Outside, traffic hummed on the distant highway. A siren wailed somewhere in the city. But inside Unit 847, time seemed to stop. What had Grandma Dorothy been hiding all these years? Sarah's hands trembled as she reached for the metal box. It was heavier than it looked, and when she pulled it out from its hiding place, decades of dust cascaded onto the concrete floor. The box itself was old, military style, with a combination lock that had rusted around the edges. We shouldn't open this. This was private. This was Grandma's. Emma looked up at her mother with those wide brown eyes that reminded Sarah so much of Dorothy. But she left it for me, Mom. The lawyer said everything was mine. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from her manager. Where are you? Your shift started 5 minutes ago. This is your third warning. Her stomach dropped. 3 warnings meant termination. She couldn't lose another job. The rent was already 2 weeks late. Emma's school had sent home another notice about unpaid lunch fees. They were barely surviving as it was. I have to go. Right now. We'll come back this weekend. But Mom. Now Emma. Sarah's voice cracked with a desperation that made Emma flinch. Buddy pressed against the girl's leg, sensing her distress. Sarah grabbed the metal box and shoved it back under the wardrobe, her movements frantic. We can't deal with this right now. We have real problems, real bills, real life. She pulled the wardrobe back into place with a strength born from panic and frustration. The bottom panel remained on the floor, but she didn't care. She was already heading toward the door. Emma stood frozen, tears welling in her eyes. This was the only thing Grandma had left her. The only piece of her grandmother that felt like a mystery worth solving, like a connection that still meant something. And her mother was walking away from it like it was garbage. You don't care. You didn't even cry at the funeral. The words came out before Emma could stop them. Sarah spun around, her face a mixture of anger and pain. I didn't cry because I was too busy figuring out how to pay for the funeral. Emma. I didn't cry because I had to work a double shift the next day to keep the lights on. I don't have time to cry. I don't have time for treasure hunts in storage units. I have time to survive, and that's it. The silence that followed was devastating. Buddy whined softly. Outside, a car alarm started blaring. Sarah's phone rang. Her manager. She declined the call and closed her eyes. When she opened them again, she saw Emma's face, saw the hurt there, saw the little girl who had just lost the one person in the world who had time for her stories and her questions and her dreams. I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. But we have to go. She reached for Emma's hand, but the girl pulled away, walking out of the storage unit alone, Buddy trailing behind her. Sarah stood there for one more moment, looking at that overturned panel, at the shadows where the box was hidden. Then she pulled down the door and locked it. 3 days passed like a fog. Sarah lost the job just as she'd feared. The manager didn't even let her explain, just handed her a final check and told her to clear out her locker. Emma stopped talking at home, spending hours in her room with Buddy, staring at the ceiling. On Friday afternoon, Sarah sat at the kitchen table surrounded by bills she couldn't pay, applications she'd filled out for jobs she probably wouldn't get, and a bottle of cheap wine she'd bought with money she didn't have. The eviction notice had arrived that morning. 30 days to vacate. She thought about her mother, about Dorothy Hartford, who had raised her alone after Sarah's father left, who had worked herself to exhaustion at that diner, who had never complained, never asked for help, never showed weakness. And what had it gotten her? A pauper's funeral and a storage unit full of junk. Sarah's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Dale from Prestige Storage Solutions. Your Unit 847 has unusual activity detected. Motion sensors triggered multiple times this week. Please confirm you have been accessing the unit. Her blood ran cold. She hadn't been back, which meant someone else had. She grabbed her keys and ran to Emma's room. The door was open. The bed was made. Buddy's leash was gone from the hook by the door. No. Sarah drove 15 miles over the speed limit back to the storage facility, her heart hammering against her ribs. How had Emma gotten there? The city bus? Had she walked? It was nearly 4 miles. What if something had happened? What if whoever broke into the unit was still there? She screeched into the parking lot and ran toward Building C, her phone already dialing 911 but not pressing call yet. When she rounded the corner to Unit 847, she stopped dead. The door was open. Light spilled out into the dim hallway. And inside, sitting cross-legged on the concrete floor with that metal box open in front of her, was Emma. Buddy lay beside her, calm and quiet. The box was filled with papers, photographs, and something else that caught the light. Emma looked up at her mother with tears streaming down her face. "Mom, you need to see this." Sarah's anger dissolved instantly, replaced by concern. She rushed inside and dropped to her knees beside her daughter. "How did you get here? How did you open that lock?" "Grandma's birthday. 0823. I just tried it." Sarah looked down at the contents of the box. Old photographs showed her mother as a young woman, beautiful and smiling in ways Sarah had never seen. There were letters, dozens of them, tied with ribbons. And there, nestled in tissue paper, was a ring with a diamond so large it seemed impossible. But it was the document that Emma held in her shaking hands that changed everything. A deed, property deed, for a house in Blue Springs, Missouri, valued at $450,000. In Dorothy Hartford's name. If you're hoping Emma and Sarah find the answers they're looking for, take a moment and subscribe to the channel. This discovery is just the beginning of something none of them could have imagined. Sarah's hands shook as she read the deed over and over, as if the words might rearrange themselves into something that made sense. The property address was 1247 Willow Creek Lane, Blue Springs. Purchased in 1985. Paid in full. No mortgage. No liens. This can't be real. Mom worked at a diner her whole life. She lived in that tiny apartment. She drove that broken-down car. Where would she get money for a house? Emma was already sorting through the photographs, laying them out on the concrete floor like puzzle pieces. Buddy sniffed each one carefully, as if he understood the importance of what they were discovering. One photograph showed Dorothy, young and radiant, standing next to a tall man in a military uniform. They were in front of what looked like the same wardrobe that now stood in the storage unit. Another photo showed the same man holding a baby, Dorothy beside him, both of them glowing with happiness. "Mom, who is this?" Sarah picked up the photograph, and something deep in her memory stirred. She had seen this photo before, or one like it, hidden in her mother's drawer when she was a child. When she'd asked about it, Dorothy had quickly taken it away and never spoken of it again. "I think that's my father. Your grandfather." The letters were next. Sarah opened one with trembling fingers, the paper yellowed and fragile. The handwriting was elegant, masculine. "My dearest Dorothy," the letter began. "I know you told me to stop writing, but I cannot. Every day without you and our Sarah is agony. The money I've sent should be enough to keep you comfortable. Please let me see my daughter. Let me make this right. All my love, James." There were dozens more. All from James. All begging. All promising. Sarah felt her chest tighten. Her mother had told her that her father was a deadbeat who had abandoned them, that he wanted nothing to do with his family. But these letters told a different story. Emma pulled out a legal document from the bottom of the box. It was a trust fund statement from 1990. Beneficiary: Sarah Hartford. Amount: $200,000. Available upon reaching age 25. Sarah's 25th birthday had been 15 years ago. She had been pregnant with Emma, working at a grocery store, barely making ends meet. And there had been money sitting somewhere waiting for her. Why would she hide this? Why would she let us struggle? Buddy suddenly stood up, his ears alert. He walked to the wardrobe and began pawing at it again, but this time higher up at the doors themselves. Emma followed him and pulled open the heavy doors. Inside, hanging alone in the empty space, was a garment bag. Emma unzipped it carefully, and both she and Sarah gasped. It was a wedding dress. Pristine white silk and lace, clearly expensive, clearly never worn. Pinned to it was a small envelope with one word written on it in Dorothy's handwriting: forgiveness. Sarah's fingers trembled as she unpinned the envelope from the wedding dress. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded carefully, the edges worn as if it had been opened and read countless times over the years. The handwriting was her mother's, but shakier, written recently, perhaps in the final months of her life. "My dearest Sarah," it began. "If you're reading this, I am gone, and I pray you can forgive me for the lies I told and the pain I caused. Your father, James William Bradford, loved us more than life itself. He was a good man, an officer in the Air Force from a wealthy family in Boston. When I got pregnant with you, his parents threatened to disown him if he married a diner waitress. He chose us anyway. He bought the house on Willow Creek, set up the trust fund, and was planning our wedding when his plane went down over the Pacific in 1984. You were only 2 years old." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Emma moved closer, reading over her mother's shoulder. "His family blamed me for his decision to stay in the military instead of joining their business. They said I had trapped him, ruined his life. When they offered me money to disappear, to never contact them again, to never tell you about them, I was so hurt, so angry, so proud that I took it. I took their money, bought this storage unit, and buried everything that reminded me of James. I told myself I was protecting you from people who didn't want you. But the truth is, I was protecting myself from the pain of losing him. The trust fund was set up before he died. I couldn't touch it, couldn't cancel it. So I hid the documents. I watched you struggle as an adult, pregnant and alone, just like I had been, and I said nothing. I told myself you were strong, that you would survive like I did. But strength born from unnecessary suffering is not a gift, my darling girl. It's a curse I should never have passed on to you. The house has been maintained by the trust. It's waiting for you. The money is waiting for you. James's family never knew about it because he set it up independently. It's yours. It always has been. I was too proud to admit I was wrong, too stubborn to let go of my anger, too broken to see that I was breaking you too. Please don't make my mistakes. Please give Emma the life I should have given you. And please, if you can find it in your heart, forgive a foolish old woman who loved you more than she knew how to show. Your mother, Dorothy." Sarah collapsed onto the floor, the letter falling from her hands. 39 years of struggling, of scraping by, of feeling abandoned and worthless. And the whole time there had been a house, money, a father who had loved her, a history that belonged to her. Emma wrapped her arms around her mother while Buddy pressed against them both. Sarah finally cried, deep wrenching sobs that seemed to come from a place she'd kept locked away her entire life. "Mom," she tried. At the end, she tried to make it right. 18 months later, the house on Willow Creek Lane looked nothing like it had when Sarah and Emma first walked through its doors. The overgrown garden was now vibrant with flowers that Emma had planted herself. The old paint had been replaced with soft yellow that caught the morning sun. Inside, the rooms that had sat empty for decades were filled with warmth, laughter, and the sound of Buddy's paws clicking across hardwood floors. Sarah stood in the kitchen, the same kitchen where her father had once planned to make breakfast for his family, and smiled as she packed Emma's lunch. Her daughter was thriving at her new school, had made friends, joined the art club, and talked constantly about becoming a veterinarian because of how Buddy had found the box that changed their lives. The trust fund money had been there, exactly as Dorothy's letter promised. $200,000, grown with interest to nearly $340,000. Sarah had used some to renovate the house, invested the rest carefully, and finally, for the first time in her life, felt financially secure. She'd gone back to school, was studying to become a paralegal, and had time, precious time, to spend with her daughter. On the mantel in the living room sat a framed photograph, the one of James in his uniform standing next to Dorothy. Beside it was Dorothy's obituary and the wedding dress, preserved in a shadow box. Sarah had thought about being angry, about resenting her mother for the years of struggle. But every time she looked at that letter, at those words asking for forgiveness, she chose to remember that hurt people sometimes hurt people, and healing takes courage. Emma came bounding down the stairs, Buddy right behind her, his golden fur gleaming in the light. "Mom, Mrs. Patterson wants to know if we can foster another dog this weekend." A puppy that needs a temporary home. Sarah laughed. This would be their fourth foster. Emma's room was already covered in photos of the dogs they'd helped. Of course we can. This house has plenty of room for love. As Emma hugged her tight, Sarah thought about her mother, about forgiveness, about second chances that come too late and legacies that arrive in mysterious ways. Dorothy had made mistakes, terrible ones, but in the end, she tried to make them right. And maybe that was the real inheritance, not the money or the house, but the lesson that it's never too late to try. Buddy barked at the window. Outside, spring was beginning to bloom. Thank you so much for staying with us until the end of Emma and Sarah's journey. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and leave a comment telling us what you thought. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss our next story, and let us know in the comments what kind of story you'd like to hear next. Every subscription helps us keep bringing you these emotional journeys. Until next time, remember that sometimes the greatest treasures are the ones hidden in the places we least expect, and forgiveness can heal wounds we didn't even know we carried.